It's not actually your body. It's a distinct human individual living inside of you. And I don't think that you should have the choice to kill it.
Welcome to Straight Talk on Life Issues. I'm Victor Nieves, joined as always by Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute. Today we're going to be tackling a very important conversation, and that's helping pro-lifers become more persuasive. And we'll also discuss how to make a compelling pro-life defense when you communicate with pro-abortionists.
And I have a particular interest watching this discussion, Victor, because Life Issues Institute, as you know, is all about education and finding ways in which we can make our case more effective. And these guys have done that. So the old guy's going to watch and learn.
Well, it's becoming more and more important, especially now since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. We have 50 individual battles to be fought all across this country to try and protect the unborn. And while that's a great blessing that Roe is overturned, there's now a responsibility on each and every one of us to be able to be good ambassadors for life, to know how to have these conversations and effectively defend life. And of course, we'll be going into this in great detail today with our wonderful guests, first of which is Cam Higby, a pro-life advocate and viral content creator. Despite censorship and deplatforming, he's achieved millions of followers, and his content has been seen by millions more. Cam was previously pro-choice before being exposed to pro-life education, which made him a powerful advocate for life. Cam has since been featured on Fox News, PragerU, Jubilee, as well as radio and podcasts across the country. Joining us as well is Michael DeMarco. He's currently a junior at Seton Hall University, where he's pursuing his degree in business administration. He's been advocating for the unborn since he was in high school, and his pro-life mentality can find its roots in his faith, as well as the fact that he himself was a premature baby being delivered at only 29 weeks, weighing 2 pounds and 14 ounces. That meant people worked around the clock to sustain his life. He's the president of Pirates for Life at Seton Hall. Within his role, he works with members to share the truth about the sacredness and the dignity of all human life on campus, and to speak up for the voiceless and defend the defenseless.
Cam and Michael, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. It's a pleasure to be on here with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cam, let's start with you. Briefly tell us what you do.
So I'm a media producer, and I'm also a political commentator. So I talk about these issues on the internet, and I debate people on them.
On the internet, so do you have people call in? How do you make your contact with them?
I do it on TikTok a lot. So I'll put a compelling background behind me, and then people will request to join the live stream.
How big is your following?
So it was 1.5 million followers, but then I was banned, and now it's something like 620,000.
Wow. So you got banned for what? Standing for the truth, I take it.
Well, they actually didn't tell me. So they would just outright ban me permanently. It happened around the same time that Trump got banned for the first time. No reason as to why. They actually reinstated my account like 70 times. So that account has been banned 70 times, reinstated 70 times. No reason why. Each time they've told me I didn't violate their guidelines, put it back up. I think it's probably like one disgruntled employee at the company that doesn't like me, that takes me down, and then the company puts me back up. And, now the account is completely wiped, I think. But I've still got 620, so I can't complain.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, we got tanked by Google at the height of our program when the Dobbs decision came out.
Oh, really?
Michael, how about you? Give us an idea of what you do there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a junior at Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey, studying business administration. Last year, I got involved with the Pirates for Life, which is our pro-life group that we have on campus. I was just involved as a member, but then I was approached by our faculty advisor, and I was asked if I would be willing to take over as president of the organization. So, I accepted the president this year, just trying to get things started again, because the club was pretty much dormant on campus. We didn't really have too much of a presence. They weren't doing too many things, too many events. What we tried to do this year is just to kind of get our name out there, get people to know that we are on campus, that we have a pro-life club, and just to bring more people along with us so that we can dialogue and hopefully bring people to understand the sanctity of life.
Cam, let's start with you. I'd like to know what your elevator pitch is. So you've got a few precious minutes to talk to somebody. What would you present to them?
I would probably talk about like the non-aggression principle and tell them that I think that every person has sort of a right not to be unjustly aggressed upon. And I would say that abortion is a form of unjust aggression towards a fetus. Maybe talk a little bit about parental obligation. But really, a lot of my arguments stem from what the person says to me. So I would sort of need to hear what they say and then respond to it with some kind of counter analogy or something.
Michael?
Yeah, I certainly agree. It does to a certain extent depend on what you're approached with. What I found specifically at Seton Hall is a lot of people, especially young people, they fall into like the category of, relativism, and they're kind of the opinion, to each his own. And so I think my approach is to just kind of try to present people the facts. Like a lot of our events that we did this year, we just try to teach people about, fetal development and things having to do with that nature, to try to give people a more objective view of what's really at stake here with abortion.
Do you guys have like what we would call an attention grabber, something that you would interject to get things rolling? Cam?
Most of the time I would just ask them why they're pro-choice. Really, a lot of it depends on what they're going to say to me. One of the most compelling things that I like to talk about is sort of this idea that men can't have an opinion on abortion, and then I sort of take them down the logic train with that dialogue. Sort of, you're a man, you're not supposed to have an opinion. Well, why can't I have an opinion? And then they'll respond something like, it doesn't affect you. And I'll say, okay, well, there are probably lots of things that don't affect you that you have an opinion on. Like, for example, you probably have an opinion on something like the Holocaust or slavery, although you're most of the time talking to, a white woman. I'm like, okay, so like these things clearly don't affect you, and they certainly don't affect you directly, but you still have an opinion on them. You think they're bad, right? Yes. Okay. So then why is it wrong for me to have an opinion on something that doesn't directly affect me? If I can see to them that doesn't affect me, which generally I would argue that it does actually affect men.
Absolutely. So good comments. Michael?
Yeah, sure. So when I approach people, I first like to ask, are you pro-choice? Are you pro-life? And then I always like to follow up and ask why, because I think a lot of people today, they hear things in the culture that are just repeated by celebrities, whatever the news wants you to hear, what they repeat to you time after time again. Most people just kind of take those things to heart. But I think one thing that I really like to focus on is just getting people to start to think why they believe the things that they do. And I like people to start, to discover if there's actually a basis behind something they believe.
What do you guys think is the top pro-abortion argument, and how do you respond to it? Cam?
Top pro-abortion argument is probably like the most popular one is definitely the my body, my choice thing, to which I rebut usually it's not actually your body, it's a distinct human individual living inside of you. And I don't think that you should have the choice to kill it. Like earlier, when I said that I think that all humans should have these rights out of necessity to protect self interest and the interests of others, those rights should begin at the moment a new human is formed. And the moment that a new human is formed is the moment a distinct set of genetic code is created in a separate organism, which happens at conception.
And I think, another argument that I hear a lot is, don't impose your religion on me through politics. That's what, people always say, the separation of church and state. But in terms of the issue of life, I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down. But anyway, in terms of the issue of life, it comes down to the fact that it's a human rights issue, simply by the fact that we're all human beings. Like Cam just said, the whole scientific basis behind the process of conception and fetal development, it shows us that, from the moment of conception, there's a distinct DNA sequence, and two distinct human beings present. So I think what we got to do is just educate people on that, because a lot of people just don't know.
Since I have you guys on, I'd like to ask your advice. I've come kind of to the conclusion that my body, my choice, if I respond, with the technical, medical, scientific information, it's not your body, not your choice. I have found that not to be terribly effective, because I've learned in their mind the fact that these women are faced with a 9-month pregnancy and all of the things in which it impacts their body and impacts them upon birth as to whether they parent or adopt or whatever. So I found that they look at this as very much my body. So how would you respond to that, Cam?
So I would say that, like, while it seems in the moment that those technical responses that are very dense with facts are not terribly effective in that second. I do think that these people go home and I think that they ponder on it. I think that they think about it and I think that it eats them away. Generally, when you're in a situation and you're just a normal person, you're not like us, you're not on the radio or the internet talking all day and you don't have any accountability. Generally, I think that there's sort of a visceral response when you start to realize that you're wrong, where you want to just keep doubling down and defending yourself. But I think having been in that situation before I was prominent in politics, I think that you really go home and you start to think about these things. And those are the types of things that sort of led me to a lot of the positions I have today. Is I remember when I became pro-life, I was arguing with my best friend in the car. He was pro-life. I was just pro-choice by default, didn't know anything about the topic. It was just what seemed like society had put on me. It seemed absurd to be pro-life. And we were arguing, and I was convinced that I was right. I was telling him that, aborting a baby is no different than scratching the skin cells off of my arm. And then I went home and I did a bunch of research because I was going to, come back and destroy him in a debate the next time he drove me home from track practice. And I had to go back into his car the next time he drove me home to tell him that he was right instead. I think those arguments do stick with them. I think they think about them.
Good point.
Might not change them in the moment, but over time.
Michael, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, like Cam said, giving the technical facts, it might not do something in the moment, but then I would follow up and ask, if the technical facts of the process of conception don't lead you to believe it's a distinct human being, that it's your body, your choice, I would say, what leads you to continue in that belief? Is it the fact that the fetus is dependent upon the mother? Because if that's the case, I mean, there's multiple other cases when, one human being is dependent upon somebody else for their well-being. I think it depends on, the individual case too. The technical facts definitely do make people start to think about the issue much more.
Sort of expanding on this, it seems like it's very central for a lot of people in the abortion debate, the question of when human life begins. And Cam, you mentioned earlier, unique genetic code, things like that. How do you explain your stance when you're having these conversations, maybe for the first time with somebody, and maybe they don't see it, they don't get it, whatever it is? How do you explain your stance on that to them?
Well, unfortunately, it seems kind of patronizing, but you kind of have to walk them through it. So I start with asking, at the moment of conception, what's it made out of? This fetus that you want to abort, what's it made out of? Okay. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. Try lower. Building block of life, cells. Okay. It's made out of cells. Now, what's in those cells? What is the DNA in those cells made out of? If you had to analyze the DNA in those cells, what would the genetic markers say these cells belong to? Would it say that they belong to an elephant or a giraffe, maybe? No, they belong to a human. Okay, so now we've established that it has the basic building block of life, cells, and that those cells indicate that they are human. Okay, now when you look at the genetic code in those cells, are they the exact same as the mother? Are they identical? Is this like the same as her arm cells? No, it's distinct, completely new genetic sequence, completely unique to this fetus, found in no other human being on the planet. So this is the point at which life begins. This is the point at which it becomes human, because for some reason I see like a weird delineation between when life begins and when it becomes human. Of course, it's human at conception because the cells indicate that it's human. If the cells indicate that they are human DNA, then obviously it's a human.
And Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great approach, because most people just never taken the time to actually think about it, what it means to be a human and what it means to be alive. And just to get that thought process going, I think it's certainly going to bring them somewhere.
Obviously, you encounter all kinds of people who are pro-abortion. So what is your top go-to question you would ask a person who holds pro-abortion beliefs? Michael?
My question is, are all humans entitled to the same rights? And if so, when does that entitlement begin? I guess it goes along with, when does a human life begin? What constitutes a human life? That normally leads down, the same track in terms of, like, for example, at my school, we just did with the Students for Life, their What is a Person tour. And, we asked people, when does human life begin? Why do you think that? We had, distinct pictures and different facts with the different stages of, the conception and fetal development. And, that really helped people to start, thinking about the issue and thinking about when human life begins, because, if human life begins at conception, it wouldn't make sense to, have the right to terminate that life.
Cam?
So I think the top question that I would ask them is about parental obligation. So I think that one commonality between most pro-lifers and most pro-choicers is that they generally believe that after the baby is born, there is some type of parental obligation. If you don't take care of the baby and it dies, that is neglect and you should be in jail. Most people believe this. And if you can sort of walk them back on when they think that parental obligation should kick in, you might open their eyes a little bit. So I think that Michael came kind of close to this earlier. One interesting thing that I would ask them is, first, I would get them to concede that the parent after birth does in fact have to protect the well-being of the child. Then I would ask them, what is the pivotal difference between the point of birth and the point prior to birth that entails a parental obligation after, but not before? Usually they say some kind of like dependency, or it's feeding off my body, something like that. Okay, well, it's the baby's completely dependent after birth as well. The baby literally will break its neck if you don't hold it up, if you don't hold its head up for it. It's completely reliant on you for literally everything. If you leave a baby in a room and don't interact with it for 2 weeks, it will be dead when you come back. So it's completely dependent afterwards. And they say, okay, well, it's sucking my nutrients, whatever, it's taking my bodily nutrients. I didn't give it permission. Okay, well, would you agree that afterwards you're obligated to breastfeed the child? Well, yeah. And if they say no, it's like, well, if you don't, it will die. Like, okay, well, what if I give it formula? Okay, in this situation, you don't have formula. Oh, the only way to feed the baby is to breastfeed it. Do you have to do it? Otherwise, jail. Yes. Okay. So when the baby breastfeeds, it literally attaches itself to your breast. It physically sucks the nutrients out of your body, even before birth. It's not actually sucking nutrients out of your body. Like, your body is actually delivering it the nutrients. It's not taking anything from you prior. So actually the only point at which the baby is taking your resources is after it's born, not before. And even if you were to feed it formula, it's still taking your resources, because like that formula is purchased with money, and you go to work every day and you burn your bodily resources in labor, and then your money is a representation of your labor. You take that representation of your labor and you buy formula. So you're still allocating your bodily resources to this baby. You're burning energy when you take care of it. So if you can sort of walk them back on that and sort of get them to agree that there's a parental obligation prior to birth, then you can start walking it back even farther week by week and find out, at the very least, if you don't flip them to pro-life, you're going to get them to either think about it, or you're going to get them to maybe walk their stance back just a little bit. Coming back to 6 or 12 weeks is better than thinking you can have an abortion at 8 months.
Yeah. And those who have had children know that after birth, the the drain on your resources, financial and physical, are much higher.
Exactly.
We've changed a lot of diapers in those wee hours and fed babies. So what do you guys think offends the other side the most? Michael?
I think, especially with women, they get offended, like seeing me or any guys, try to talk about abortion. They say, you don't have a uterus, you can't have an opinion. I think if you're approached with something like this, I think, it could help to like kind of draw a parallel to, like another situation. So like, you could say something like, like, what about slavery? Like, I didn't own slaves. I wasn't a slave, but I think slavery is unacceptable. Can I have an opinion on that, even though it doesn't directly involve me? And I think they'll probably say yes. I think you can and you should. So then, I would come back and say, I mean, there's no difference with abortion. If you accept that the fetus is a living human being, I mean, everybody should be pro-life.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the fact that I'm a man and I'm talking about abortion. More specifically, that I'm talking about abortion, I don't have the same position as them, because men who do have the right opinion on abortion are allowed to say whatever they want in their presence, and they don't say, "You're a man, stop talking about abortion." Of course. I find it interesting when you ask them about this slavery thing, like, can you have an opinion on slavery, or do you have an opinion on slavery, despite the fact you've never been a slave or a slave owner? Well, yes, I think it's wrong. Okay, well, how can you have that opinion? Just because I have the right opinion on slavery. Okay, well, I think you have the right opinion on slavery too. I also think that I have the right opinion on abortion. So like, this is your subjective opinion, and it's not going to hold a lot of weight. You're not the arbiter of who can hold opinions on what. So that's definitely the thing that people get most offended by. I think I ran into that a lot when I went to Washington right after, I think the day after Roe v. Wade got overturned. I went to the Capitol and met protesters in the National Mall and at the Supreme Court. And most of them were women, and they were not happy. But at the end, a lot of them cleared out, and they were still yelling at us with their bullhorns from across the street. But actually, we had sent a group out, and they got us bullhorns, and I went over like kind of taunting them a little bit. And then because I had two bullhorns, and then they sort of closed in on me, and we actually just sat in a circle, and I was like, I actually want to talk to you guys. Like, we just sat in a circle and we just had a talk for like an hour and a half, just sitting in the street outside the Supreme Court. It was really good. It was probably like 30 of us.
Civil?
On both sides. Yeah, very civil. Yeah, it was really good. I actually have it recorded. Yeah. It was good. Once the energy of the crowd died down, they were very, very willing to talk, and we just kind of came together as humans. I don't hate them.
Yeah.
I just want them to see things the way I see them.
And I found over the decades that I've been involved in this, that those who are on the other side become the best ambassadors for the babies. Abby Johnson, for instance, is one of those. And we have some some wonder former abortionists that have stories and messages that we just can't come close to sharing. But the men issue is right. I think that ticks them off the most. I wish they could sometimes see the men that I counsel after abortion and how they are so broken and despondent as a result of the death of their child. For many of them, I think they may see the men in a new light. Do you think social media is the place to have a debate on abortion, Cam?
Yeah, I was sort of forged in fire on social media. Not only is it a great place to have discourse, I think it's a great place to hone your own arguments and your own positions. I think it's a great place to hear counter evidence because, like, as a pro lifer, or regardless of what we're talking about, right? I have lots of positions on lots of different issues. Regardless of what I'm debating, I need to hear counter evidence, not only because I need to know how to combat it, but also because I need to know that I'm right. If there's a piece of evidence that I've never heard that proves I'm wrong, I need to hear it. And I think that that's something a lot of people on the left, unfortunately, aren't doing. So it's a great place to do that. And it's also a great place for people to watch and hear our arguments to sort of further, I guess, provide them with information as well and sort of boost their critical thinking. I think it's a really, really, really good thing.
Yeah. And those sitting on the sidelines quietly observing everything and reading the responses, you'll just never know how many you're impacting. Michael, what is your thought on social media?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great place to have, a civil discourse, especially because, I mean, you have the internet right at your fingertips. I mean, it's really easy to share anything, from, debates, information and stuff, that you can find online to back up your claim. And likewise, it's easier for you to be presented with counter evidence that you can, look at and see, if it has any merit to it. But additionally, I think it's also easier to educate on social media just because you can make like a post or something. Like I know with the Pirates for Life, we have an Instagram. We post informational things on there all the time. Like you said before, Brad, you don't know how many people it's gonna reach, but it's gonna reach a lot of people, and it's certainly gonna have an impact.
Here's an important question for both of you, and I'm sure you've had to kind of figure this out for yourselves as you've gone with debates. At what point do you say this is no longer productive and stop a debate?
I'm really bad at this because I'll literally just sit in a live stream with somebody for 4 hours and debate them unending on abortion or whatever topic. And I'm not the one who quits. Usually I'm the one who gets quit on. I would say usually around the time that it's time to go to bed.
I would say from my own experience, if you encounter people, and you're trying to reason with them, trying to bring them to recognize certain things, and they just keep regurgitating, the same thing over and over again back to you. I think that's the point where you realize we're not really getting anywhere. And I think it also points to the fact that, with this, the pro-life battle and with other things going on, in our nation and around the world, all these other life issues and dignity issues that we face, I think, what the foundational problem is, it's almost like a war against reality. People just like don't want to recognize, the reality of certain things. And I think, that's what leads to an inability to get somewhere when you're trying to explain these things to certain people.
Sam, you mentioned the circumstances where you changed your mind after discussion. Looking at the other side of the coin, with you as the pro-lifer, what personal experience did you have where you took on a pro-abortion person and made a really good case?
When I was at the Supreme Court, I think that I made a lot of good cases to a lot of different people. And a lot of it was very civil. There was some violence. Somebody actually, me and a friend of mine, friend of Victor's too, we were walking down sort of the sidewalk in the National Mall, and somebody came up, and I was recording him from above with my tripod. Somebody grabbed his tripod out of my hand, took off through the National Mall, and smashed it on the sidewalk. So there was some of that, but largely a lot of the discourse was very civil, which was surprising because these people are energized. Roe v. Wade got overturned the night before. They're in Washington. They either traveled here or they took work off that day to come here, and they're mad, but they're still like actually taking the time to talk. And I like that. There's one really famous clip of me floating around somewhere where I executed the Holocaust argument. She said something along the lines of, "You're a man, you shouldn't have an opinion on abortion." I'm like, "So you're saying because I'm a man, I shouldn't have an opinion on abortion?" "Yes." "Okay. Are you Jewish?" "No." "Do you have an opinion on the Holocaust?" "Yes." "How can you have an opinion on the Holocaust if it doesn't directly affect you?" And that clip went super viral. That's probably the best recorded case that I have of pulling like a quick, really effective argument on somebody. But a lot of times when I debate this issue, these are like several hour long debates. So it's hard to pin down any specific moment. There's been a lot of really good moments. I think that I'm a really effective debater, but that's a really famous one.
Michael, you run into a lot of pro-abortion students, no doubt. Academia is fertile ground for
Yeah.
pro-abortion extremism. Tell us about a story or an account that you had with somebody who was pro-abortion.
Sure. This is an interesting story. So it was at our What is a Person tour that I spoke about before. This one guy came by and, he was passing by. So I go over to him and I say, you mind taking part in the survey we're doing over here? So he says, sure, no problem. So I bring him over by us. We have a whole table set up and, a display. And I said, when do you think human life begins? And, why do you think that? And I think his answer was, when you have the ability to think, or it was something like that. So then I was like, all right, so you think, so what constitutes humanity? Being alive plus the ability to think? Well, I said, if that's the case, then what about brain dead people? What about like young children who don't have their reason fully developed yet? And, I was just like, I was asking him questions, trying to make him think. And, it's like I said before, he just kept regurgitating the same thing over and over and over again. I was getting a little frustrated because, we weren't really getting anywhere. And this was during the maybe November. It was a little cold outside. So he came into the building that it was in. He had like a sweatshirt on. So I guess when we were talking, he started to get a little hot. And he unzipped his sweatshirt, and I see inside his sweatshirt he had a green scapular on. So I'm not sure if you guys are Catholic or not, but I'm Catholic. And we have these things called scapulars. And over the centuries, the Blessed Mother appears and she gives us certain things. And the scapular that he was wearing was a green scapular, and it's used for converting people. As soon as I saw that he was wearing that, I was like, yo, I say, what's the story with that green scapular? And he was like, that my mother gave that to me. She told me she wanted me to wear it. I was like, oh, I said, do you pray the prayer on it? Because there's a prayer on it that you're supposed to pray to convert people. And it's Immaculate Heart of Mary, pray for us now and at the hour of our death. That's the prayer you pray. So I was like, have you been praying that prayer? And he was like, no, I haven't. I was like, oh, well, you know what you should do? Every day you should start praying that prayer. But it was really interesting. He didn't completely convert to our cause, but after that little interaction there, he stopped, like regurgitating things as he was before, and he started to think and to process what we were telling him a little more and what we were presenting to him with our table. So that probably the most interesting interaction I've had, this past semester.
What I wanted to ask Michael is, what are some of the things that you and other students have been doing on campus to defend life? You mentioned that you've had some of the, interactions with students and certain events. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So, it's a Catholic university. So we partner up with campus ministry to do certain things. During October, I believe it's the Catholic Church. It's a National Pro-Life Month. So what we did during that month, there's an office in our area. It's called the Mercy House, and they help all mothers in need, stuff like that. So we did a baby bottle drive where we hand out baby bottles to people. They fill it up with their change. They bring it back to us. We send it to the Mercy House. That way they can provide mothers with everything they need. They have abortion counseling, diapers, clothes, just to help mothers. And I think that helps our cause too, because, what we hear sometimes is, you just care about, babies in the womb. Once they're out, you don't care. And what this does, like this baby bottle drive, for example, it shows people that it doesn't matter the stage of life, no matter the stage, everybody's entitled to dignity and the right to life. No doubt it's a difficult decision for a mother to choose to keep her baby, especially, if she's suffering an economic hardship or something like that. So we got to help those mothers. And this is what this baby bottle drive really showed people. And I think it really just helped to show people once again that, we care about defending life at all stages, in the womb and out of the womb.
When you interact with people and you get kind of almost violent verbal reaction, I found that sometimes that what's behind that severe reaction or emotion is the fact that they are defending a past abortion, whether it's the father or mother. What has been your personal experience with that potential situation, Cam?
Yeah, I've definitely debated with people who have had abortions before, and it definitely impacts the veracity at which they defend the quote right to have an abortion. What I would say to those people is like, just because you've had an abortion doesn't mean that it's too late to switch. Like you can still acknowledge that there was a problem with what you did, and you can still switch your position. There's nothing stopping you, regardless if you had a 100 abortions, right? You can still come back and you can still switch to the right side. If you're a drug addict, you can still get clean, right? Like there's still hope for you. You can still do this, but it is tough because they feel as though they're being personally attacked. We're arguing from an objective standpoint. We're not attacking them. But they feel attacked because they know that they've done this thing. And, sometimes they're telling you they've done this and sometimes they're not, but it impacts the veracity at which they argue at. So
what has been their reaction to you saying, it's never too late to come to the light side, if you will?
I mean, I think it's again in like one of those in the moment things where they don't really care just because it's in the moment and they're trying to be right.
Processing it maybe, but I think maybe that's one of those statements that you said earlier make an impact once they've gotten to their dorm room or wherever to think about the conversation. Michael?
Yeah, well, I agree. I think they certainly feel like it's a personal attack. And I think it has to do with also, there's definitely trauma that comes from having an abortion. And I think a lot of the times, unfortunately, women just bottle up the trauma inside and instead of, dealing with it. And it takes like a hold in them. And I think when they hear, a pro-life argument, it kind of instigates that deep wound that they have, because I mean, they're in need of healing. And I think that's the main message we have to show them, that, there is healing. It's never too late, to come to the truth, so to speak, and to heal from what has happened.
Is there anything that either one of you would like to add that we haven't covered so far?
I would just urge anybody who might be pro-choice to read literature instead of just sort of regurgitating things that you hear online. While I think the internet is a valuable tool to learn things, you should also pair it with reading.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd also like to add, I think I spoke about this to our group when we were going down for the March for Life, but what really had an impact on me and other people who joined us is, we take part in the 40 Days for Life vigils during the fall and during the spring. And I think, regardless if you're pro-life or pro-choice, to be out in front of the abortion clinic and to see, the women going in and then coming out, that's the ground zero for what we're talking about. And, you can talk and have discourse about all types of things, but when you're actually there and you see what's going on, I think it's really easy to get a realization of what's actually happening here. And I think it's much easier to get, back into reality.
Well, Cam and Michael, thank you so much. That's a good note to end on. Thank you both very much for your contributions.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Well, Brad, I've enjoyed this conversation quite a lot. Like I said before, I think it's so important that each and every one of us are good ambassadors of the pro-life movement. We're going to have friends, family, coworkers, different people who know that we stand for human life, and they might have questions for us. They might even want to have a rigorous debate with us. And we have to be prepared to have those conversations. And I think today's program was very helpful in getting people ready for those conversations.
Victor, there's a saying, when you're green, you're growing, and when you're ripe, you rot. And I've always kind of held on to that saying, to listen to those around me in the movement and learn from the statements, the methods, their style of debating. And we can certainly do that. Everybody brings to the table a different perspective. And these guys had quite different perspectives. One an LA guy, the other devout Catholic in a Catholic institution, but yet they're bringing very effective statements and information to us.
That they were. And speaking again of the effective information statements and resources, all of that will be available on lifeissues.org. So you can find the most up-to-date resources and information to help you on our website. You can also join the Life Defenders today to be a daily part of our work to save the babies while promoting a culture of life across America. Giving monthly in any amount is a tremendous commitment to the pro-life movement. We may not all be high-level pro-life debaters, but we can all support vital pro-life education through a monthly donation. Monthly giving helps us reach persuadable audiences with a pro-life message, and it enabled the very creation of this show. Help us do more for the babies by becoming a Life Defender offender today. Once again, you can easily sign up while you're on our website, lifeissues.org, and be sure to tune in next week for more straight talk on life issues.